All right, so VikesNow, Dustin Baker, the final day of May edition. We woke up on Tuesday morning, which felt like a Monday because of the holiday, with the quasi news that Dede Westbrook is working out for the 2022 Vikings, and he was an alumnus of the 2021 Vikings, a punt returner. So last season, was it July? Westbrook was signed, and that was exciting and a relatively big deal because this was still the territory when the Vikings were desperately seeking productivity at the WR3 spot. Some, like me, thought it would be Westbrook because he had a resume that suggested this guy is more than just WR5 or 6. He had seasons in 2018 and 2019 where he caught the ball with proficiency and correspondingly notched significant yardage. But at the time, that's right about the time that Westbrook was signed by the Vikings, is when KJ Osborne, was creeping up the depth chart. We just didn't know in the summer if it was the real deal. Well, it was. In the regular season, KJ Osborne became the bona fide third wide receiver for the Vikings. Probably arguably for the first time since Jarius Wright. And we always put Jarius Wright on this cloud, this pedestal, because he was the last WR3 that was worth a damn for Minnesota. But truth be told, he was just decent. In our standards, he was wonderful. But Osborne came along and really changed the narrative and showed, hey, even a Zimmer team can find a WR3 after 4 years of trying. So this is, if indeed, hopefully by the time you watch this, you'll either know or not know if Westbrook becomes a part of the Vikings in 2022. But this one is a little strange because I've told you guys and written about it on VikingsTerritory.com that the days of holdovers, former players coming back, should be kaput. I believe in a writing or on this show, I left myself an out because Westbrook would make sense because of his connection to Keenan McCardell, who was like the only notable holdover on the Vikings coaching staff. So if McCardell likes Westbrook, we presume that he does. They were a tandem in Jacksonville. Then yeah, this one adds up. It's unlikely that the defensive guys, the Zimmer guys, the Spielman guys, like Anthony Barr, Everson Griffin, Andrew Sandale, we probably won't see those dudes coming back because there's no ties to anybody in the organization. However, there is this Keenan McCardell one to Westbrook. So while they're probably, or Kyle Rudolph, that's another one, could maybe happen because he's actually pretty good in the red zone. But with Westbrook, this one checks out a little bit because of the McCardell tie. If he did come back, I don't at all foresee him as a viable wide receiving threat because he would have done that last year. He had every opportunity in the book to oust KJ Osborne and Ihmir Smith-Marsette, two young guys who should get better, and he didn't. He became the punt returner. So, if this comes to fruition, that would be the reason that they're not sold on their punt returning candidates in Ihmir Smith-Marsette, KJ Osborne, or Jalen Nailor. And they'll go with the safety valve of Westbrook for punt returning. That's my theory anyhow. I guess he could always blossom into a WR4, which he was better than that in Jacksonville. But we probably would have seen that last year. He was an average, decent, safe punt returner for the Vikings. Per yards per punt return, he ranked 11th in the NFL with 8.3. So, not crazy dynamic. He's probably due for a home run at some point, which would be sweet in the 2022 season. But yeah, you should perceive this workout of Westbrook by Minnesota as a potential punt return union. Otherwise, he could vie for a WR5 spot, which coincidentally is what he was last year, but it's just a different atmosphere in 2022 than in 2021. When Westbrook posted on Instagram last year that he was coming in on the airplane above Egan, the Vikings really needed a WR3. Now they have one KJ Osborne. They have one who will fight for it, Ihmir Smith-Marsette, and then possibly Jalen Nailor. So it puts Westbrook in very familiar territory in terms of the offense, and that's, can he make it as a WR5? Now, historically, the Rams brought 6 wide receivers onto the 53-man depth chart. I don't think that would be skimped or cut for the Vikings. So I would think if you're making your depth charts at home this summer, that the team will carry 6 or 7 wide receivers. And then, Westbrook as a punt returner, perhaps Dan Chisena as the gunner, the special teams guys, he could make it. But this sets up, if Westbrook is brought aboard the team, this sets up a unique implication for B.C. Johnson. Because B.C. Johnson is coming back in a contract year. This is his final year with the team, if he makes it at all. And there's been many hype surrounding him coming back. Kirk Cousins touted him as a guy he's excited to see again. And that could just be Kirk speak, or he actually might think that he's good. And Smith was moderately productive in 2019, a little bit in 2020, when our bar for wide receivers not named Thielen, Diggs, or Jefferson was really low. But BC comes back from the torn ACL, fighting for a roster spot. Probably not good news for him if Westbrook signs on the dotted line. The same thing goes, but in a lesser pivotal way, for Jalen Nailor. So Jalen Nailor was the dude that Keenan McCardle allegedly pounded the table for during the draft. He was the only wide receiver from Michigan State, only wide receiver at all drafted by the Vikings in the 2022 NFL draft, which tells you they feel pretty good about where they're at. However, if you want him to break out and make an impact as a rookie, signing Westbrook dampens that enthusiasm. Nailor was also somebody that Paul Allen called last week a dark horse to win WR3. I think Paul Allen said that in his estimation, Nailor had plus 200 odds to win WR3. Well, we're scratching our heads saying, we already have Osborne for that, Amir Smith-Marset. But hey, if Nailor was that good, well, sweet, we'll take it. But on the whole, for both B.C. Johnson and Jalen Nailor, a Westbrook sequel probably doesn't help them at all for this season. Now, Nailor has oodles of time to emerge, get better, kind of like KJ Osborne took 1 year to really get going. But for BC, an acquisition of Westbrook or an ascension by Nailor would probably be the nail in the coffin for his Vikings career, in my opinion. Do you care? I don't know. He's not crazy dynamic, but he's been with the team since 2019, so there's some warm, fuzzy, sentimental ties. What else do we got on Westbrook? He'd be cheap. Last year wasn't very expensive, and I think if they have him slated for that punt returning role, it won't be crazy expensive. I wouldn't expect him here longer than a year, maybe 2, but that's the implication. The Vikings don't have tons of cap room, but it's also not terrible, which we're used to staring at Spot Rack or overthecap.com thinking, oh boy, 28th. It's really not that bad right now, thanks to some finagling by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. But Westbrook would be cheap. So if you're new to the Vikings or new to Westbrook, this isn't going to be some big splash. They're going to have to sling several $1 million out. It's worth noting that earlier in his career, out of the gate with Jacksonville, indeed, Westbrook was productive. With Blake Bortles in 2018 and then Gardner Minshew in 2019, in both seasons, he caught over 650 yards receiving, which is what KJ Osborne has last year. So he has that in his body and brain somewhere to be productive as a pass catcher. I only bring that up because this is a brand new offense. This isn't a Zimmer redux. So in theory, if something happened, if injury occurred to one of the big three, Jefferson, Thielen, and Osborne, Westbrook could be a reasonable candidate because he's done it before with a lesser offense. One funny thing about Bortles is that when I was coming up on Vikings Twitter, debunking a lot of myths about the Vikings and then about Kirk Cousins, one of the most popular ones was that Cousins is a garbage time savant. He does all of his damage in garbage time, and then when it gets down to regular game situations, he isn't very good. Which, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that's false. Cousins, like the rest of them, performs well in garbage time, but then the narrative that doesn't get carried over is that he pretty good too in regular situations. However, when I was researching that, trying to figure out if there's anything to this, because so many people say it, Bortles was always a guy that came up for the stat padding metrics. Of course, that's not intentional. It's just that he was on shitty teams in 2015 when he threw 35 touchdown passes, I think it was. It's because the Jaguars weren't very good, and they were just flinging it in the fourth quarter when they were down by 21, 24 points. So Bortles, at a time in his career, was indeed a stat padder, that's when he was at his best, whereas Cousins performs well in garbage time and in regular time. The takeaway there. All in all, I think the temperature on this Westbrook thing that dropped in our laps on Tuesday morning isn't as exciting as it was the last go-round. I think I admitted earlier in the show here that I was pretty pumped when he signed on because I thought, oh, good, they're getting serious about WR3. Little did I know that KJ Osborne already had plans for that. So this, as a punt returner, I guess it'd be cool. I'd personally like to see what some of the other dudes have and not even monkey with Westbrook. But if they like him, who am I to say? I don't know as much about wide receivers as Keenan McCardell, and if they want him aboard, it's probably for good reason. But generally speaking, last year was the time when it was like, sweet, they're getting Westbrook. And now it's like, they got enough wide receivers. We'll see what happens. All right, I'm sorry about the layoff there for 2 or 3 days for the holiday, but I will be back tomorrow and Thursday, and then I'm off for a week on a road trip to Seattle. But that's all I have for Tuesday, and Skol, baby.